Well, good morning. Can I start by just giving an update on the coronavirus itself? There have been no further reported positive tests for coronavirus overnight. We still do have patients within isolation wards within our public hospitals. My understanding is all of those patients are doing well and they will be authorised for release as soon as the virus has left their body. And so no further update there. I will just again reiterate my grateful thanks to all of the people within SA Health who have acted so swiftly to protect South Australians' health, safety and wellbeing with regards to the coronavirus. We're not going to stop it coming from to South Australia. We're certainly not going to stop it from spreading around the country. But what we can do is to slow the progress so that we are putting ourselves in the very best position possible to respond to and prepare for the necessary response to the inevitable outbreak of the coronavirus here in South Australia. In particular, again, I would like to acknowledge the great work of the Chief Public Health Officer in South Australia, Associate Professor Dr. Nicholas Furia, and the Head of the Communicable Diseases Control Branch, Dr. Louise Flood. They have done an outstanding job. We already have now we've now already stood up 5 dedicated coronavirus clinics in South Australia for the rapid testing and assessment. We have one at the Royal Adelaide Hospital, the Lower McEwen Hospital, the Flinders Medical Centre. This morning we opened at the Women's and Children's Hospital, and of course the drive-through at the REPAT. It's fair to say that we are leading the nation in the preparedness and the response to the coronavirus outbreak, and there will be further responses. And what I'm really pleased about is yesterday's workshop, which was held again, going back to the plans that were put in place 2, 4 and 6 weeks ago, making sure that they still remain current, making sure that they relate to exactly and precisely what's happening in other jurisdictions around the country and the work of the AHPPC. So there's a lot of work that has been done in preparation. There's still a lot of work to do. And whilst my #1 priority will always be the health, safety and welfare of South Australians, we cannot turn our mind away from the likely economic impacts of the coronavirus here in South Australia, more broadly around the world. We've already seen a very significant effect in South Australia with regards to the number of international students here in our state. We've already seen a massive deterioration in the number of international visitors coming to our state, and we are now hearing the implications from a trade perspective following on from the coronavirus. So international students, international visitors, and now trade. So there are going to be significant effects going forward. That's going to happen without a doubt. What we need to do, though, is to be as prepared as possible, not just for the health implications, but also the ongoing economic and employment implications here in South Australia. And that's why today I've just come from a Budget Cabinet Committee meeting, and what the government has decided to do is to announce an immediate $350 million economic stimulus outside of the budget period. This is an unprecedented initiative to get in front of the game with regards to the likely economic impacts of the coronavirus as it rolls out around the country, as it rolls out across the world. The key criteria for us in spending this $350 million is to make sure that it's projects that are ready to go now, not in 3, 6, 9 or 12 months time, but now, that it maximises the amount of South Australian employment and or the amount of South Australian product or service which goes into the provision of that expenditure. $350 million, an unprecedented stimulus, because we want to make sure that we minimise the effects of the coronavirus on our economy in South Australia. Now, some of the areas which we will specifically be focused on, and there is a further Cabinet meeting tomorrow morning and a further Cabinet meeting on Monday morning, will be focused on infrastructure projects, so bringing some already authorised infrastructure projects forward, some new infrastructure projects, some maintenance projects, for example, the shoulder sealing of roads in country SA. These are projects that we can get on with as soon as possible. Tourism infrastructure, housing infrastructure, and of course a range of health-related projects which are going to help us to be as prepared as we possibly can. I've got to say all of these things are done because we want to protect the people of South Australia from the economic impact, and most importantly, we want to come out the other side of this coronavirus problem stronger and more resilient than we have been in the past. We're very proud that we are, as a state government, leading the nation in terms of putting this state-based stimulus package forward. We're very grateful to the work that the federal government has done regarding supporting the states in regards to the likely health cost implications. The $2.4 billion package, which is on the table, is an absolute lifesaver for many of the states, certainly here in South Australia. We know that there are going to be additional health-related costs. We've already borne many of these additional health-related costs in terms of standing up the dedicated clinics, and there's much more that needs to be done. We'll be working through the details of that with the federal government over the coming days. Of course, I'm meeting with the Prime Minister tomorrow, and then we have COAG on Friday, and we'll be doing everything we can to maximise the flow of that $2.4 billion funding to South Australia. If you consider what we're likely to get from that and our stimulus package, we're talking about a massive additional cash injection as quickly as possible into our economy to make sure that we can really weather the storm that's coming our way.
So what money, if any, is new here?
Well, there's $350 million
So that's
worth
all
of
new
new.
money, or is it from old projects that come?
Some of them are projects which are being brought forward, but for example, one of the things that we will be announcing is the massive increase, $70 million increase to the Economic Business and Growth Fund. So this will be looking for shovel-ready projects where we can partner with the private sector, multiply that money and get that money onto the ground as quickly as possible.
So Premier, have there been specific projects identified? I know you've mentioned in general terms,
Yeah.
but have you pinpointed projects?
Well, only a few hours ago we announced or agreed that we would put the $350 million envelope in place. Yes, there are some projects that I think that we will be ready to announce later today, tomorrow, and in the coming days, and some of them are funds that we'll put out to the market as quickly as possible and look to bring forward multiplying monies both from the federal government, the stimulus, which we've already heard about, local governments and the private sector.
So do our borrowings have to increase?
Yes.
By how much?
Well, look, I think that it's been it's very clear to all of us now that we are focused on the health implications in South Australia as our #1 priority, and the economic growth implications and maintaining jobs as our #2 priority. Now, the Treasurer has already been on the record saying that it is extraordinarily unlikely that we are going to be posting a surplus this year, and I think it's looking increasingly likely that this will be very difficult to do next year. But our priority is on protecting the health, safety and well-being of all South Australians and making sure that we can weather the economic storm which is inevitably coming our way. And I think this is exactly and precisely what the people of South Australia want their government doing at this very, very difficult time.
So you can't say exactly how much extra on top of what is already a large debt that the state has. Over and above that, it's not the entire $350 million.
Well, a lot of that is, Mike, I'm not trying to be difficult, but we will work through those details because, as you're aware, the federal government will be announcing their stimulus package in the coming days, and we want to be able to maximise, if you like, as much money as possible being partnered up with the federal government.
Why not wait to see what Canberra is going to deliver? So you're not doubling
We
up.
can't wait here. We've got to get on with it. We've got to send a very strong message to the people of South Australia, to the businesses of South Australia, that we're not sitting idly. We're not going to wait for people to lose their jobs. We're not going to wait to be kicked in the guts by the coronavirus. Hot on the heels of being kicked in the guts with bushfires, hot on the heels of being kicked in the guts with drought. We want to make sure that every South Australian and every business knows that we're going to do everything we can as a government to make sure that we, one, keep people's health and safety as our #1 priority, and #2, we protect every single job that we possibly can. Now, we know that there are tough times on the way. Australia is not going to be immune. South Australia is certainly not going to be immune from the impacts of the coronavirus. But I'm very proud of the work that we've been doing in preparation, getting ahead of the game. We're leading the country in terms of our health response, and we're also going to be leading the country in terms of our economic response to the coronavirus.
So out of the 350, 70 is going to be new projects, haven't been around before, and the entire balance is just moving forward?
Well, as I said,
on other stuff?
I'm not trying to be difficult, but I've only just come from the Budget Cabinet Committee where the $350 million envelope has been agreed. And there will be a range of projects which will fall broadly into those headings that I outlined before. And we'll be presenting the people of South Australia with the detail of that as quickly as we possibly can. But what they need to be assured of is that we have a government in South Australia which is putting them first. They are our priority. Health number one, jobs number two.
So just to clarify though, you'll be deciding how the money is spent rather than sounding from people saying we have a project we'd like funding for?
To be quite honest, Tom, we've been working on this now for a number of weeks. Today we got the authorisation from the Budget Cabinet Committee, which is a subcommittee, if you like, of the Cabinet. Cabinet meets again tomorrow to look at further projects, and again on Monday. And we will be announcing those as quickly as possible. Our criteria are projects that can begin immediately and projects that have high levels of employment in South Australia and/or projects which utilise materials or services which are produced here in South Australia. This is not going to be an economic stimulus like we might have seen in response to previous disasters, global disasters, where money's still being spent 6, 7 or 8 years down the track. This is immediate response to protect jobs here in our state.
What's the university sector? You touched on them being hard hit by this. What's going to help you?
Well, we've been sitting down and working through some of the implications with the university sector, in particular how we can, if you like, support any efforts that they've got to provide their services online, and they've been working very diligently through some of those options. But there's no doubt there are very significant implications for our secondary schools in South Australia, the vet sector, but most importantly, the massive number of international students who are just not permitted to come back here into the country. We've just seen an announcement this morning from the federal government, which is now making it clear that people cannot come directly here from Italy. This is an issue which is going to get worse before it gets better. What we've got to do in South Australia is to make sure that we are as prepared as we possibly can. And I've got to say, and I hope everybody in the media pack understands just how far in front of the game we are in South Australia. Our Communicable Diseases Control Branch is best of breed. Our Public Health Administration is best of breed. They've been thinking of these scenarios since the very first time this was reported in the media, and they're working through all of the likely scenarios and our responses to them. We've changed legislation in South Australia in record time. We've stood up 5 clinics in record time. We're still the only place in the Southern Hemisphere with a drive-through coronavirus testing and assessment clinic. This is leading innovation, and it shows the level of capability that we have within SA Health.
Is this package going to be entirely funded by debt, or are you imagining that it'll be funded from extra revenues like tax increases?
We are not envisaging any new measures to offset these, so this will have a direct impact upon the budget in South Australia. And I make it very clear, at times like these, we are prioritising, number one, the health of the people of South Australia, and number two, the protection of their jobs.
So no new taxes?
Correct.
So Premier, if someone has a worthy project, I know this sounds a little like it's a familiar story from Canberra, but if anyone has a worthy project, can they come forward with it? Is there scope for that?
To be clear, Mike, and I'm not trying to be difficult in any way, shape or form, but we have had problem after problem after problem. First of all, we've had a devastating drought in South Australia. Some areas of our state haven't had any substantial rain for 4, 5 and 6 years. So we're fully aware of the issues there. Then we're on top of that, we've had these devastating bushfires, and then on top of that, the coronavirus. So many of the things which have been put forward as part of those 2 previous issues will be, if you like, rolled up into what we can go out with now. Now, there's no shortage of suggestions of how we can spend state government money. I get a lot of those on a daily basis. Our criteria here, though, is how we can spend that money quickly to provide stimulus that leads to jobs or work here in South Australia.
So the extra money you put into tourism a few weeks ago to help Kangaroo Island and the Hills. Will that be rolled up into this 350
So we
million?
did announce $22 million over the weekend, in fact on Sunday. That's part of the $350 million, but there's a lot more in terms of what we'll be announcing with regards to Kangaroo Island, other areas that have been affected, and of course our regions, which are doing it extremely tough. These are all examples of economic stimulus, and as I was saying before, these are things that we have been considering. They were things that we were going to be bringing forward for the budget. We cannot wait. We simply cannot wait until June to get in front of this issue. So we're making this immediate economic stimulus of $350 million. And I'm quite sure there'll be a further consideration of projects in the budget which will be brought down in the State Parliament in June this year.
Premier,
Heavy,
yesterday the
infrastructure.
Victorian Premier said it's inevitable that all schools in the state will be closed. Do you share that sentiment, or do you think that was alarmist to say that?
Look, I'll leave other premiers to make their own comments of what is going to occur in their states. I make it very clear here, we are not making pronouncements as politicians. I think you'd be hard pressed to find me leading the pack with regards to this in any way, shape or form. We take the advice of the experts. I think we are extraordinarily well serviced in South Australia with Dr. Nicholas Spurrier, Dr. Louise Flood, the Communicable Diseases Control Branch. They are basically on a hookup on a daily basis with the Australian Communicable Diseases Network and the AHPPC. They are the body that is coordinating the national approach. We take our advice from the experts, but what we do in South Australia is when we receive that advice, we implement it as quickly as possible.
Premier, do you know what's in the federal government package coming
The
tomorrow?
$2.4 billion in the
No,
health.
but the broader stimulus package?
We have had some discussions, as I've said at previous press conferences, for a number of weeks where we've been putting forward suggestions, but we'll leave that up to our federal colleagues to announce. What I can say is at a time like this, you actually need all levels of government working effectively together, and we have got that here in South Australia. We've got an excellent working relationship with the federal government and with the local government sector and with the private sector. Everybody is leaning in to be as prepared as we possibly can, and that must fill the people of South Australia with some level of assurance in the time of real anxiety. We know that it's an anxious time for people, but what they should be assured of is that we are not leaving a single stone unturned from a health perspective and now also from an economic perspective.
There's a heavy construction focus in what you're announcing today, infrastructure focus. Why do you consider that to be the best area to stimulate, given tourism, hospitality, services seem to be ones that are going to be suffering most?
It's a range. There's an absolute range of issues and programs that we will be announcing. $350 million is a massive stimulus outside of a budget. In fact, I think it's probably an unprecedented South Australian stimulus outside of a budget. So there's a range of projects, and we'll look forward to bringing those to the public's attention as soon as they have been finalised.
Did you consider any direct household support? You know, the right era sort of stuff.
No.
I mean, to drive consumption.
No.
Consumer consumption.
When will the
first
even though this
projects-
has only just come to light, and you say some projects like the 22 million announced over the weekend will be rolled in, is that the only funding that's already been announced
Yes.
that will be rolled in?
Yep.
So it's just
Although,
the 20
as I was just saying before, some projects which have been announced that might be 3 or 4 years down the track, if some of those can be brought forward, then we'll do exactly that. There are some, so the things that are easiest to put into place are projects that have already been agreed, the consultation has been done, the procurement has been done, and it's just ready to press the button. That doesn't exist in a range of projects that still need that final design. So that's why maintenance projects are very attractive at this point in time, and we want to basically push on with those as quickly as possible. Now, some of those monies could have been in the forward estimates, I'm not 100% sure, but bringing them forward to begin next week, the week after that is our priority. We want to get people employed in South Australia as quickly as possible, here in metropolitan Adelaide, and right across our state for regional and remote South Australia.
So do you have a figure on how much of the 350 million has already been allocated, apart from that 22?
All of this will be going through with specific projects in the coming days.
And how do you maximise local employment and materials on these projects?
Yeah,
What's the
well,
mechanism for doing
this
so?
is our number one criteria, quite frankly. There is no point in spending government money, which is finite, let's be very clear about this, if it's not going to maximise the employment opportunities in our state. So we'll be looking at this issue extraordinarily carefully and making sure that we maximise the number of jobs and the amount of work that stays here in South Australia from all of this $350 million stimulus that we're announcing today.
Does that mean there'll be a requirement for a basic amount of local content in any of these projects?
100%. 100%.
So the requirement will be 100%?
No, what I'm saying is 100%, that is our focus. You know, we need, look, from this, think about it. What are we trying to do here? We're not trying to spend money that we don't have. We are trying to stimulate economic activity to buffer the inevitable consequences of the coronavirus coming to South Australia. And we're getting ahead of the game. So rather than waiting for the inevitable, we're getting out in front of it. We're protecting our economy as much as we possibly can. And we're not going to say that there are going to be no implications for South Australia. But what we are going to do is to minimise that to the best extent possible. Thank you very much.
Can I ask on one more
Sorry.
topic? Can I say John Hanlon, former